Hilary Crowder is the ex-wife of popular right-wing pundit and commentator Steven Crowder. Steven announced their split back in April of 2023. Since then, things like a video of Steven getting angry at his pregnant wife have surfaced, which in my opinion has led the public to believe Steven was a bad husband and the reason why the relationship failed. This may indeed be the case. However, since their split, Hilary has started her own Twitter account where she posts relationship advice, and after reading some of her takes, it seems that Steven may not be the only contributor to their failed marriage. Take for example this tweet about female entitlement. Female entitlement is expecting mind reading from men and becoming angry when they don't fulfill the above and beyond gestures that you never even asked them for. If he wanted to, he would. Pertains to following through and showing basic decency in a romantic relationship and following the unwritten rules. Like a lot of bad advice, it seems to make sense on a superficial level. Humans can't read minds, so you shouldn't expect that. It's not good to get angry when your spouse doesn't go above and beyond for you, but they should at least show basic decency and follow the rules that everyone should know about, right? Unfortunately, if you actually think about it, no, this is not right. Everyone has their own idea about what basic decency is. Even the same person's idea of basic decency changes depending on the circumstances. A husband who had a hard, long day at work might think it's basic decency for his stay-at-home wife to have dinner ready for him, while his wife, who was taking care of the kids and running errands all day, might think it's basic decency for her husband to make dinner. If you reverse the roles, it's very possible that both of their expectations reverse as well. The same wife who thinks her working husband should cook dinner might think the opposite if she was the one who had a long day at work. The same husband who thinks his stay-at-home wife should cook dinner might reverse his position if he was the one taking care of the kids and running errands all day. This is because a person's sense of basic decency isn't just determined by their values and experience, but it's also a product of personal bias and how informed they are about the situation they're trying to apply it to. The husband who had a long day at work not only may have a different general standard for basic decency, but in this situation, he's only operating with knowledge of his side of the story. He knows exactly how much struggle he's had to deal with over the course of the workday, how it's made him feel, and how much energy he has left in the tank. He doesn't know this about his wife, and even if she spent hours explaining it to him, he still wouldn't literally understand exactly how she feels. The same is true in reverse. With that said, what happens when the husband and wife have differing standards of basic decency? Who makes dinner? Well, if we operate by Hilary's logic, a fight is inevitable, since both husband and wife believe they alone get to determine what basic decency is, and therefore if their spouse refuses to submit to their standards, then their spouse is doing something wrong. Relationship fights start when people believe they are being wronged. Disagreeing with your spouse's definition of basic decency isn't wrong, because no one has the right to force their subjective standards on the other. However, believing that your spouse is obligated to submit to your definition of basic decency actually is wrong, which is why Hilary's advice is so destructive. The same is true in regards to unwritten rules. Unwritten rules are nothing more than a type of expectation. Every person has a set of unwritten rules or unexpressed expectations that they want their spouse to adhere to. However, just like basic decency, your spouse isn't obligated to submit to your unwritten rules or expectations just because you believe in them. Like basic decency, our unwritten rules are largely a product of our upbringing, our experiences, and our personal standards. Unless you're claiming that your spouse is doing something morally wrong, you have no right to get angry at them for violating your unexpressed standards or expectations. Then they have a right to get angry at you for violating their standards or expectations. The only rules that you and your spouse have an obligation to follow are those that you've both agreed to and objective moral values. Lying is morally wrong. Therefore, both of you have a moral obligation to not violate the rule, that is to not lie. Physical abuse is morally wrong. Therefore, both of you have a moral obligation to not intentionally inflict physical harm upon one another. Not honoring your word is morally wrong. Therefore, if you've made an agreement or gave someone your word, you have a moral obligation to follow through with it. However, your spouse is not wrong for failing to abide by a standard that they never agreed to, simply because you really believe in it. It is not wrong for your spouse to not do the dishes, even if you really believe in some unwritten rule that they should be doing it half the time. It is not wrong for your spouse to not automatically take on all domestic labor just because they aren't spending as much time at work as you are. It is not even wrong to violate the Mike Pence rule, where the husband can't be in a room alone with a woman that isn't his wife. You might agree or disagree with some of these rules, but that doesn't mean your spouse is wrong for violating them. If you really feel strongly about a rule and want your spouse to live by it, what you do is talk to them about it and try to come to an agreement. What you don't do is get angry at them because you're a tyrant who thinks the subjective standards and rules you have in your head are superior to those of your spouse's, simply because you really like them. In that case, you are the bad guy. You are the problem. That kind of mentality is how you end up with two people screaming at each other because they both believe they have authority over the other as they try to force their subjective standards onto their spouse.